Welcome in to the Hot Read podcast here live from Mobile, Alabama at the Senior Bowl on this wonderful and amazing Tuesday, January the 28th. I am your host, JT Ruhnke, reporter and writer here at Broadway Sports Media, 440 Sports, and everywhere you can find me on Twitter at JT_Ruhnke, and I am joined today by none other, live in person here in Mobile, Alabama, with my amazing co-host Stoney Keeley, editor-in-chief of Sobros Network, one half of Football and Other F Words. The other half is being a very rude person in our chat over things we couldn't control today, and writer at stackingtheinbox.com, Stoney. How are you doing today, my friend? And I just noticed that I should probably charge my laptop while we do this so that we don't go unlive in the middle. So I'm gonna have you vamp here for a second and talk about how your day's been so far, and I'm gonna go plug in my computer.
I can certainly do that. Day one of Senior Bowl practices. This is year 4 for me. Grateful, fortunate to have been able to come down and cover this fine event for so long. This is the first year getting to do the Hot Read live from the 440 house down in Mobile, Alabama. And I just want to say there's a lot of freaky ass shit in this building right now. There's a sex doll over there. I don't know if Braden wants me saying all this stuff, but there's like all kinds of sex masks. And there's sex swings at the kitchen table. It is a wild spot to be, but I'm feeling good. So far, I do think that I've dodged the sunburn allegations. I remembered my sunscreen, so the lotion boys are kept at bay for now. See what I'm saying? Freaky ass stuff to have sex in.
Yeah, this is great, and I'm assuming that everybody can also hear us right now in this podcast. And now I think we're good. D-Good saying the late read podcast is better than the hot read podcast because better late than never, I always say. And I want to put it out there because the allegations that that Easton is in the room with us or something like that. No, my friends.
No.
You can thank our lovely and amazing Airbnb host, the person who got us this place, Braden Gall, for going way over time on his podcast before this, talking about the top 25 college football rankings for next season, which is very important on January 28th.
Mm-hmm. I think he can hear you, JP.
I was hoping he would.
Okay. Well, then maybe we'll go a little louder.
Okay, sounds good. And yes, no, we you were talking about, as Zach said, we are slacking on the Winsel trips right now. We have not. Is old man Winsel alive? Is he breathing? I don't know yet. That is something that will have to change. Obviously, we've been, the Lotion Boys and the rest of the damn band here of national media have been up to some hoodwinks and hijinks so far this week. So it's been a good time. Eddie's saying Nashville Sports Media Hype House 2025. I would.
It's a hype house.
This is a hype house. We have a pool table. We have everything that you could possibly want. And it's all thanks to our wonderful and amazing sponsors on the screen right here. ML Rose Craft Beer and Burgers Restaurant and Sinkers Beverages. Check them out in the Nashville area. Love both of these places. ML Rose, 7 wonderful locations. Sinkers Beverages, got to go over there and join their in-crowd. Thank you for sponsoring the show. Stoney, we did set out today to do what we wanted, which was watch some caked up men play some football. And I think we were really able to get that done today. Would you agree?
Yeah, there's a lot of thick-ass men down here in Mobile this week. It's been a lot of fun to watch them.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it just wasn't just the men. We also got to talk to Brian Callahan and Mike Borgonzi today as well. Their thoughts on the first day at the Senior Bowl. And I think that's where we're going to start off our conversation today.
Okay.
Before we do that, Ed Henry asks, has Stoney snatched a moon pie out of the air like a seal yet?
Not yet.
I don't think you have.
We can make that happen.
do you think Robert Saleh is here, or do you think he's still transitioning into his new role with the San Francisco 49ers and cannot throw you a moon pie?
I don't think he's going to be. I think it's just the head coaches that are part of the parade that throw the moon pies. And I don't think maybe Mike Kafka can throw me.
I was going to say, which head coach would you want to throw you a moon pie the most?
Mike Kafka.
Mike Kafka? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wonderful. I just think that would be fun.
Okay.
Picture of Mike Kafka throwing moon pies.
Yes, very much so. Let's talk some real football here now. Talking about Brian Callahan and Mike Borgonzi, what they had to say today. We got a couple of minutes with both of them. I do also want to note that we wanted to talk to both of them, but they kind of got caught up talking to a certain ACC head coach from.
Well, probably trying to get intel on Jalen Rivers, the guard that was down.
Yes, they were probably talking to a certain ACC head coach trying to get information on the Miami guard Jalen Rivers. Yes. No other certain Miami player who might be throwing the ball. But we did get to talk to them, and I think we can start off with the conversation we had about Brian Callahan and get some of the more broader, bigger picture things out of the way first. Obviously, you really can't go the next 4 months without at least mentioning the first overall pick at least once in your shows, I think. And so we did get to ask Brian Callahan a lot about where their heads are at right now with this pick and where they feel like they're going. And a lot of the talk today was talking about how both Easton Freeze and Braden Gull asking these very interesting questions regarding how the team knows when you're going into a draft like this that is the guy that you're going to take there. How can you be set and forget in your ways when you are coming to look at a lot of these prospects? And Brian certainly had a very interesting answer on this, and I think that's where we can start our discussion today. Here's what Brian Callahan had to say on that. Maybe we don't have that. Okay. Anyways, he said.
I can't hear it.
I know. I realized too, and then I realized I also couldn't hear it, and this is wonderful. But to paraphrase what Brian Callahan said, just pull the quote up here from earlier. Brian Callahan really talked about it's tricky when you're talking to a lot of these prospects, and when you're going through it, you never really can be sure, right? At the end of the day, the NFL draft is always going to be a crapshoot. But they've been in this position before. At least he has. And he says in Cincinnati, we knew we were going to take Joe Burrow pretty early. However, right after that, he says that's a bit of a different story. That's not what this draft is right now for us, which I think is incredibly interesting given.
It feels like a pretty important quote.
It does. It is. I think when we were driving back, you said that is a quote.
That is sure. A quote.
And then when we talked to Mike Borgonzi as well today, the whole notion of them wanting as many picks in the top 100 as they possibly can has been a huge point of emphasis. Mm-hmm. And certainly as we continue to talk about the Senior Bowl for the rest of the week here, there's so much talent that is going to be able to be had on day 2, especially in rounds 2 and 3, that, with the Titans only having 2 picks, the first overall and the 35th, it kind of pigeonholes them into a situation where when you're at the Senior Bowl, looking at all these guys who could probably come in and be a set and forget starter from day 1 and be a plug and play guy, it's really hard to evaluate that when you're not in a position to do that. And so I asked Mike Borgonzi today, when you're looking at these guys, and how much talent there is, does that even more emphasize the idea that you guys could pursue the avenue of trading back? And what Mike Borgonzi said is, of course, they're always going to be looking at all options. However, he also doubled down on the idea that if there is a player there that you can't pass up, you're going to stick and pick the play, which I think really talks to the way that where he came from in Kansas City, the way they do their business. If there's a player they're going to be convicted on, even if they could maybe move back and get more capital to maybe get 2 or 3 players who could be plug-and-play starters. If they believe there is a player either at 101 or at 235 that they know is going to be a bona fide stud for this team, it sounds to me from what he said today that it really feels like they might just end up sticking and picking at those 2 picks if they feel so inclined.
Yeah, and I think it's, one of the things that we're kind of learning is that we're still kind of early in the process, and so much of the scouting process is when you get to know these guys. So to me, it kind of feels like when they keep saying these things like, well, if there's a generational talent, if there's a player there that we can't pass up there at 101, or talking about the quarterbacks, it does kind of feel like, did we just lose audio? Are we good?
I think we're good.
Okay.
I think we're good.
It does kind of feel like, maybe it isn't necessarily a smokescreen, because we learn like they're getting to know those players, and ultimately like that's part of one of the biggest parts of the scouting process is the competitiveness, the desire, the want to play. And so as we continue to go into draft season, we're going to start checking off more of those boxes. And I think when we get to the end of the road is when we'll know, like, hey, was there a generational talent in this draft that you guys couldn't pass up on? Or, inevitably, are you going to be trading back?
Yeah, and I think that is, ultimately the biggest thing for me when we talk about generational prospects. And this is something that we've continued to harp on already this week on our show yesterday with Braden and Nick Suss, the Tennessean. You talk about generational prospects, and even when you think about the 2 that may be the ones that you end up taking in Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter, are they truly going to be those generational prospects that you really want out of this class? I don't know yet, right?
Yeah.
It's tough to say.
Mm-hmm. I think the tape is good, right? And especially in Abdul Carter's case, I think he's got the best tape of the class that I've watched so far. I think he's number 1, polished, robust, well-rounded edge rusher. Travis Hunter, I'm a little lower on than I feel like the consensus, but I do think those are the 2 guys that, from a talent perspective, I just don't feel like guys like that come along very often. And so those would be the 2 for me. I don't think there's anybody even remotely close to that.
No, I definitely would agree. And it becomes such an interesting topic because as we get into our Senior Bowl discussion here, this draft class, I think, is going to be maybe a little bit of a letdown compared to last year or maybe the year before that.
Yeah.
I think when you're talking about, the difference between taking one of these maybe 3 or 4 blue chip players that you have the ability to take this year, and then you look at the rest of this first round and the rest of the crop here, there is talent to be had, but by no means do I think that it's anywhere near what we saw last year or in some of the previous years. And so when you're talking about that generational prospect, even if it isn't the surefire thing, right? Given the way the board is set up right now, if there isn't a reality where the trade back still lands you a player you feel good about, you have to just kind of stick and pick in this scenario.
Well, yeah, and you hope that one of these teams that are within striking distance of the top overall pick fall in love with one of these quarterbacks. If you think about like the Giants, if they just fall in love with Cam Ward, he's the franchise changer. They want to move up to number 1 overall. Take Cam Ward, the Titans can slide back to 3, and their consolation prize is still going to be either Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. So it's a good spot to be in. Maybe they can pick up an extra pick or 2, but I think there are ways to finagle that for sure.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you there, which leads us into our Senior Bowl conversation. And to me, Stoney, when we watch practice, I have to be honest, for me, I think my expectations of what the Senior Bowl class today is, they were tempered a little bit. I had to temper my expectations.
Well, there's a lot of people that didn't make the trip to Mobile that aren't going to be practicing this week that I think dealt a blow to the overall solidity of this Senior Bowl class for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you just go down the list of names of guys who were supposed to be here and present, who are maybe not present for the practices, but maybe in the interviews here. you go with Ayu Manor, Savion Williams, Armand Membo, Shamar Turner, Will Howard, Chase Lunt, Nick Scorton, all these guys just not participating. All these, a lot of this talent that we thought may be around the, anywhere from like a 15th overall pick to the 40th pick. Like these were a lot of the guys who I think were some of the most intriguing ones for us. And it's a big bummer. And, the talent simply doesn't match up to what last year's Senior Bowl had, I think, given the first day of practice. But I do think it also kind of shows us that, a little glimpse into this may just not be as good of a draft class as a whole than years prior.
Yeah, I think it could be reflective of several different things. The reasons that players don't want to come to this All-Star game anymore is maybe a separate discussion, but I think it is also reflective of the overall kind of scattershot nature of this draft class. There were guys getting invited to the Senior Bowl that frankly I hadn't even heard of, that weren't on my radar at all when I started all of my draft prep. That then like the Senior Bowl invites people based off of like who NFL teams want to see. They talk to the scouts, that sort of thing, and I'm like, where did this wide receiver from Arkansas come from all of a sudden? And he's making plays today in practice, but it's just, to me, it kind of feels like the draft class that is all over the place because there's no real defined order. I think there are maybe 8 to 9 true first round graded prospects in this. And where I think this draft class is the strongest is that you've got a wave from like 10 through 60 that are all like just solid starter potential in the NFL, and then it kind of falls off a cliff. So I do think day 2 is the strength of this draft class. But yeah, you're right. It does kind of feel like it's going to be harder to pluck those hidden gems out of day 3 this year.
Yes, as I think our chat today has kind of gone off the rails talking about
Has it?
Selling us into servitude of some sort in the Chalet de Marty or whatever, the Chateau de Marty today, which was a great reminder that if you are indeed watching us here on Twitter or Facebook and want to join the conversation about who would cost more, I guess, on the streets of Mobile, Alabama, you can join us over on the 440 Broadway Sports Media YouTube channel. And we're, of course, sponsored by the lovely and amazing ML Rose and Sinkers Beverages. ML Rose, 7 wonderful locations in Capitol View, Franklin, Gallatin, Melrose, Mount Juliet, Sylvan Park, and coming soon to Inglewood. Over 25 beers on tap. Stoney, the food already on day 1 has been incredible here in Mobile. But I have to say, I'm missing that ML Rose. I'm missing that ML Rose food.
I tell you what, Braden got a fake crunch wrap on the way back from practice.
He did have a crunch wrap from Taco Bell.
It made me think about the real crunch wrap at ML Rose and how good they do it, and that's immediately where my brain went.
Yes.
Man, you can't have a crunch wrap at ML Rose and then go back.
That is true. So, and there are a few days left to get their burger of the month, which is the Chopped Cheese Supreme Burger, which I've heard is excellent. I know you've had it.
Yeah.
Got to get out to ML Rose if you are in the Nashville area. Fortunately, we are not. And while you're out there at one of these wonderful ML Rose locations, do us a favor and go over to Sinkers Beverages to get all of your booze, wine, liquor, beer, all the great things, food and beer. We are sponsored by those 2 things. Thank you to ML Rose and Sinkers Beverages for sponsoring the show. Before we get into the guys who really stood out today, the guys who stood out to us today, I want to talk about people, in this class that did not, and those people would be the quarterbacks. The quarterbacks this year, it was a rough day for quarterbacks. To go from last year's Senior Bowl where you had guys like Bo Nix, Michael Penix,
Sam
Hartman, a lot of, guys who have, at least for Michael Penix and Bo Nix have, already had a sizable amount of snaps in the NFL this year.
Yeah.
You go back to what we saw today, which is, Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, Seth Hennigan, Dylan Gabriel, the short king. And as Ed Henry says, I do think that maybe a little bit of the evaluation today on some of the skill players like the wide receivers. I think a lot of their reps were kind of tanked by the fact that there just wasn't a lot of on-target balls today, which I think is really unfortunate.
Was it you or Easton that got the video of Tez Johnson running this just really crisp route?
I do, and I can bring up here the we have some video here from footage as we talk about the Senior Bowl today. Free to play. It's in here somewhere. Tez Johnson just running a great route.
Releases outside and just immediately separates by like 5 yards, just wide open.
And the funniest thing about the ball never comes into frame. It's just not there.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
Yeah, it's one of these two here. As you can kind of see, a lot of these passes just went straight out of the end zone, which I think was really unfortunate. Xavier Restrepo also not having a lot of opportunity today, even though I did think he did some of the good things out of the wide receiver group today. But bottom line, I think we went into this Senior Bowl thinking there are some quarterback prospects here that are intriguing if the Titans wanted to take a flyer on day 3. And so far through one day, a guy like Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, they're not doing it for you right now, or at least they're not doing it for me.
Who would you say was the best quarterback today?
Seth Hennigan? I think Seth Hennigan had some of the best, some of the best throws. I will say Jackson Dart was probably the most on time and was able to deliver the ball the best. Tyler Shuck, as Braden says here in the comments, was another one that I think had a fine day, but no one really stood out. And I think that's one of the big problems here when you're dealing with the skill position.
And to be fair to the quarterbacks, I mean, it was day 1. There's a lot of, install type stuff. You're running operational procedural stuff to start the practice. Like you're really getting out on the field with these wide receivers in some cases, probably for the first time. I know like Dylan Gabriel and Tez Johnson connected quite a bit this season, but in this setting, it is kind of a situation where it might take some of these guys a little bit to ease into a rhythm. If we still see this kind of stuff tomorrow, then I will be ready to just indict this entire program.
Yes. But it wasn't all doom and gloom because we had some really good standout guys today. And I think with the first practice we saw, one of the guys of the entire day was a guy we've been kind of talking about on our show for a while now, Mike Green, the edge rusher out of Marshall. Mm-hmm. This is a guy who I think when you initially brought him up, he kind of just, the tape reflects what we kind of saw today, where he's got this, maybe a little bit undersized. I believe he's 6'3", 251. So maybe.
Well, but they were saying he was 230 prior to coming in today. So when he weighed in yesterday at 251, it was a trend in the right direction. He's bulked up a little bit, and he looks like a brick wall out there. I mean, he is ripped, jacked to high heavens for that frame. So I would be curious to see what he weighs in at the combine to see if he's adding muscle at this point. But it did not look like the added weight was at the sacrifice of the bend, because the bend was still going out there today.
No, I think that's what makes him such an intriguing prospect that could eventually be like someone like last year, Robinson, the kid out of Central Michigan last year, who was, I think he went to the Cowboys last year. Maybe it was Overshawn the year before. Okay. One of them. Those guys who just are late, those late year risers that out on the edge that really just pop at an event like this. And I think Mike Green can definitely be one of those guys this year. You talk about how he's built like a brick wall, but still is able to bend like that. That's something that you didn't see a lot of out of everyone today. But when he was doing his reps, you really saw it. And I think that is one of the most intriguing aspects if the Titans were to, let's say, stick and pick at one or trade back a little bit and still end up with a Shadur Sanders, a Cam Ward, a Travis Hunter, and maybe miss out on a guy like Joel Carter.
Yeah.
Taking a guy like Mike Green at the 35th overall pick could still very much be in play for this team.
Absolutely. Add some teeth to the pass rush. I think another question about Green. Look, I'm not trying to knock Marshall. It's a very good football program. It's not the same as playing in the SEC. You know, when I watch dominant tape against Southern Miss, that's, you know, Southern Miss is not very good this year. So those questions, I'm not saying it's like, you know, FCS level competition, but I do think they're fair questions about the quality of offensive tackles that Mike Green was going up against at Marshall. And so to see him get out there on the field today and win reps against, you know, some pretty decent level offensive tackles.
Emory right there on the screen.
Yeah, so I think to see that was encouraging. You factor in the added weight, and he has checked 2 big boxes on the right track to the combine.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. The offensive tackles in the first group, I think, as a whole, kind of were some of the standouts of the day today. You talk about Connerly, you talk about Gray Zabel, a lot of these guys, Barton, a lot of guys who are playing on the left side, who I think are intriguing projects if the Titans were to look in the second round, who had some good reps today. Emory as well, like, as he kind of put on a show today against him, and Barton both put on a show today against Landon Jackson, which we'll talk about in a little bit here.
And Landon Jackson got chokeslammed.
Yeah, it wasn't a good look for him, I definitely would say. But a lot of the offensive tackles today, I think, really surprised me and showed that, well, it may not be like last year where you have this high-end elite amount of talent in the tackle position.
Yeah.
There's still going to be guys worth picking on day 2 there in the second and third round. And starting today with a lot of these guys, it'll be interesting if the Titans do end up having interest in them, because a lot of them did play left tackle in college. Now, if they're going to stick with J.C. Latham on the left side, it would be yet another kind of project, flipping yet another tackle to the opposite side. But what you saw today, especially as you can also see on the screen here, Titans assistant offensive line coach Scott Fuchs, we were talking about him all day. He was one of the guys there that was helping them out today, and I think that is not nothing, especially for this team, having their fingerprints all over the roster.
And I think Connerly, Belton, and Ursery were all, as advertised, really good quality reps at left tackle. My question would be, can we see them get some run on the right side to see how easily they could flip? And if not, like entertaining the idea, could you flip J.C. Latham back to right tackle and play with one of these guys? I don't know. And they seem to be content to play J.C. Latham at left tackle. He seems to be the guy they drafted to be the left tackle. So I don't know that. I'm just saying it's interesting because these guys were pretty committed to that position today, whereas a lot of the other offensive linemen, Gray Zabel, Jalen Rivers, Marcus Imbo, and Jonah Monheim, a lot of these guys were playing different spots along the offensive line, but Ursery, Belton, and Connerly, by the way, could end up being the top offensive tackle taken in the
That was actually going to be my next question to you. Do you think that Connerly ends up maybe by the end of this being offensive tackle?
I mean, for me, it's between him and Josh Simmons, but Josh Simmons is coming off of a pretty bad injury to his knee, and I think with Connerly not having those concerns and having really good tape to begin with, really good day today, I think he could solidify himself as the top offensive tackle that's actually going to play offensive tackle in the NFL. I was telling Zach earlier today, I won't be surprised if we don't see Connerly, Belton, or Ursery at Thursday's practice. If they have a good day tomorrow, I think they're going to answer all the questions we have about them, and they're going to call it quits. That's how good they were today.
Yeah, and another guy who projects on the inside, who, I don't think he would sit out because he comes from, maybe needs a little bit more tape on there, or maybe just eyes on. But Gray Zabel, I think, for me, was undoubtedly the player of the day that stuck out to me.
Both squads or just the first team?
Both squads to me.
I would agree.
That's a guy who I think we all kind of were on a consensus that, like, it's not just the right tackle position for the Titans. We talk about these tackles, right? But at the end of the day, right now on their roster, with guys under contract, they do not have a starting right guard or right tackle with Dylan Ravens set to hit free agency. So is it possible that they take the alternate route and find a veteran right tackle and look at a guy like Ray Zabel to come in and immediately plug and play at that right guard position? I wouldn't be surprised at all if they try that.
I wouldn't be surprised at all either. And he offers a little versatility at center as well. He took a lot of reps there today. Quick mover. He's a wrestler, like gets his hands inside, holds on, and just rides the rep out. Really tough, hard playing kind of guy. When you talk about football character, and we've heard Borgonzi and Brinker kind of talk about like wanting the guys that just want to play football, the obsessive football guys. Zabel played today, practiced today, like one of those guys that was just not going down without a fight. I mean, the feet were constantly moving. He was mirroring these rushers, winning reps. It was quite impressive. I think he was probably the most impressive guy today.
Let's talk about a little bit about the wide receivers today, and we touched on it just a bit. That if the quarterback play gets a little better tomorrow, could we see some more really good reps from some of these guys? Your thoughts on the first group of guys between Tez Johnson, the Iowa State guys, the Xavier Restrepo, even Jalen Lane from Virginia Tech, who kind of popped up on our radar today as well.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that concerns me about Tez Johnson is the size. I mean, he came in at 156 pounds with the measurements yesterday. Tiny. He looks tiny. And even seeing him in person, you're just kind of like, if he didn't have a uniform and helmet on, I would not think that's a football player. But the Tez Johnson factor is once the ball is snapped, and he is quick, he is shifty, he is lightning fast, clean releases, can play wide receiver. But the question for me is going to be, how does he hold up at the next level, taking NFL shots every Sunday?
Yeah.
So I like Jalen Lane a little bit too. He was a name that popped several times today. A bunch of people mentioned him to me. I spent all my time with the offensive and defensive line, so I haven't been able to catch up on the wide receivers just yet. But from a tape study, the Virginia Tech receivers are kind of perplexing because there's not a lot of production there, and I don't know why. Like, there's talent all over that Virginia Tech roster. The fact that they didn't win more games than they did is a puzzle to me. But for Jalen Lane, like, he is that versatile slot guy that can line up all over the formation. You just want to get the ball in his hand, see what he can do. A little bit stockier build, but similar mold to Tez Johnson. There's a few of those guys down here in Mobile this week. And I think one of them was bound to kind of rise up. And after day one, if we're talking about buzz, Lane's name was the one that I heard the most today. So he's got an impressive foundation to build upon. We'll see if he holds on to that throughout the week, or if these other guys start waking up a little bit, or if just the quarterbacks suck and this is what it is.
I mean, yeah, it's kind of hard when you have the Canadian Cannon as one of your quarterbacks this week. Just
slinging it all over the place. But I don't know. I guess Dylan Gabriel threw a ball 100 miles an hour today. He threw it to Pensacola.
Oh,
from
wow.
Hancock Whitney Stadium.
Okay.
Or maybe Senior Bowl step.
Love it. Let's talk about maybe some of the guys that surprised us in the wrong ways. And I think the first you have to start with Landon Jackson. Dude just is built straight up. Like, I don't know if there's another word for it. Like, dude looks like a Detroit Lions football player to me.
Yeah,
but the practice today for him, I think, was rough.
I didn't think that he did anything really spectacular one way or the other. The only thing the play that immediately comes to mind is getting choke slammed by Anthony Bell. But other than that, I thought he was fine. Like, that's kind of his game. If you watch his tape, I don't think he's a very exciting player, but he's just constantly tough, strong, sets the edge. He doesn't really bend, but he can, force awkward run lanes by eating up space and that sort of stuff. And I think when we watch these practices, specifically these one-on-ones, those boring things that you do well don't really show up. They don't really pop. You want to see guys definitively ended up on the ground, definitively winning a rep. And I don't think he did enough of that today to really stand out. But outside of getting chokeslammed by Anthony Belton, I don't think it was the worst day either.
Yeah, that is fair. I think it'll be interesting to see how he rebounds. Tomorrow, Jake's saying that he heard Dylan Gabriel threw it in the pond at the Titans practice field. So that went that far.
That's good.
All the way back to Nashville. David Walker was a guy that you really liked coming out into the Senior Bowl here. But I noticed that when we first were kind of looking over at the guys before the practice, you had some concerns about David Walker, and the size is fine. It's just the build of him is a little weird.
He's a little stumpy. He's a little stumpy, a little short, a little light for an edge rusher. I was looking over his measurements, and it kind of made me think, are they going to get him some run at linebacker? Because he was technically listed as a linebacker, I think, on the Senior Bowl's website. So I didn't know if maybe that was the intention, but they had him out there with the pass rushers, and I don't think it was a situation where he was just dominant out there winning, but I think he did a good job to hold his own, and I think there were a few reps that he did definitively win today. So, I would call it probably a net positive for him. He was not completely invisible today.
The guys who were invisible, I think, for me, as a position group as a whole, outside of maybe the quarterback just being bad, they were invisible, but they were visibly bad. This cornerback prop, this go around at the Senior Bowl, has just not really done it for me. I don't know if you have if you saw anything different, but we talk about last year's Senior Bowl crop of guys who, from day one, you noticed how sticky they were in the one-on-one drills and in coverage. You had the Max Meltons, you had the Drew Phillips, you had the Jarvis Bradley Jr.'s. You have all these guys who you immediately had stand out. It didn't feel like that was the case, at least for me today. I don't know if you have maybe a differing opinion, but I didn't really see any guy, and obviously the Titans are pretty well equipped at corner right now. So it's not as pressing of a need as it was, say, a year ago. But, was one of the areas that I thought, wasn't the strongest in terms of recent history at the Senior.
Yeah, I think a guy like Azareye'h Thomas is probably improving his stock here. Again, didn't watch a whole lot of the defensive backs today, but, a guy that probably is in that class of going to show up, go through the motions, make sure he can run the drills, get to know a few teams, probably be out of here on Thursday. I think he's going to be a first rounder. There are some analysts out there that think he's the best cornerback in this draft class. And he was the only one that I really made an effort to go look at and watch a couple of plays and see, okay, is he stacking up to the expectations? I felt like he was. I will also say I like Darian Porter, the cornerback out of Iowa State. Long arms, long frame, physical kind of guy. Intrigued to see what he can do this week as well.
Yeah, and then we can move to the second practice today, where there was a lot of interesting guys, especially on the main thing at the Senior Bowl is that the defensive line prospects here are just they are the cream of the crop. They got
a stable of them.
That's the one that you definitely want to be looking at, and I think it's a good thing that the Titans definitely need some guys on the defensive line.
Yeah.
In that second practice, I know you were watching a lot of the one-on-ones there. Who to you really stood out on both the offensive side and defensive side of that trench? Because when we talked to Mike Morganzi also today, we discussed, when continuing to try to rebuild this team, what's kind of some of the more important things. Obviously, quarterback's important, but trying to get this thing back together as soon as possible. He kept emphasizing that you really have to build in the trenches if you want to turn things around quickly. And obviously, that's something they might be able to do here with the Senior Bowl talent at hand. Your thoughts on some of those guys in the second round of practice?
Yeah, I thought it was a really good practice for the guys they alternated at right guard, and that was LSU's Miles Frazier, who is a big, thick-assed man that was playing well out there. And a bit of a surprise for me was Jackson Slater out of Sacramento State. Both of those guys look pretty good. I tried to key in on the right side of the offensive line, And watching the tackles between the right tackle and left tackle as a whole, the drop off between the first group and the second group was noticeable. I mean, you go from having Anthony Belton, Ariante Ursary, and Josh Connerly at your left tackle spot in the first practice to rotating between Logan Brown, who's a good offensive tackle, played right tackle at Kansas. They moved him over to the left side, and I don't know if that was because there was no Jack Nelson, a lot of tackles dropped out.
Yeah.
Or what, but they rotate between Logan Brown and Carson Vincent out of Alabama A&M, who had a pretty decent day as well. And then on the right side, you're rotating between Emory Jones Jr. out of LSU and Jonah Savanea out of Arizona. So it was a stark contrast to what we saw in the first practice. I mean, it was just kind of like, yep, that's what a left tackle looks like. Good reps. They're putting people in the dirt. Okay, to the next one. You kind of watch it and you think, man, these guys are struggling a little bit. And it was the case, the right tackle spot. I've been a big supporter of Emory Jones Jr. I liked his tape quite a bit, but today he kind of struggled a bit with speed around the edge. And Savanea kind of struggled to keep his pad level down sometimes. He got blown off the point of his block a couple of times. And, edge rushers, this group specifically, they were able to take advantage of that. But where I regularly saw wins was inside that right guard spot between Jackson Slater and Miles Frazier as well. So those are two options that I think I came away with today saying, you know what, day 3, right guard might be your starter.
Yeah, I think that could very well be an option there for the Titans if they do, because once we get to those day 3 picks, like the Titans have an abundance of them. I wouldn't be surprised if this idea that you have a coach in Bill Callahan, just get him as many shots at these guys as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing from the Senior Bowl, especially on the interior of these offensive linemen, is very promising. So I love that as well. Deion Walker.
He's a mountain.
Big man today. I'm excited to see what he continues to do, especially against the little UNC center that could.
The
fullback, which I think you had to point him out to me. I had not even heard of him, but you talk about a guy who literally just looks so much smaller. Like it was the Aaron Brewer of Aaron Brewers out there today at center, and seeing him go up against Walker was one of the funniest things today. And he held his own sometimes, but then Walker's just his big physicality and his presence on that line showed you why I think he gets a look at maybe the late first round, just based on those traits in his build alone.
Yeah, and if you go back and watch last season's tape, that was what put him on the map as a first rounder. I think there was a little bit of a dip in 2024, but I thought he had a good practice today. Now, you talk about, his name's Hampkin, I think. I can't remember the UNC center. He's a scrappy guy, fights with his hands, fights with his feet, stays active throughout the rep. Like, you don't get to the Senior Bowl at that size, at that position. He's like 6'2", 260 something at that position without having some fight. And I thought that he did on certain reps show a lot of fight. But yes, also Deion Walker was basically just walking into the backfield on some of these one-on-ones. I will say that I noticed a couple of times Clay Webb out of Jacksonville State. I thought he would get some reps at center. I think some of the substitutes and the replacements kind of dictated they needed him at guard. He played a lot of guard today in the one-on-ones. No gloves lineman as well. He got the better of Deion Walker on more than one occasion. Just a tough guy, hand fighter, hard hand strikes, kind of throwing Walker off balance. There was a rep that Webb lost pretty badly to Walker, but I think he made up for it later. And then I had walked out of the practice already, but Zach came up and told me that when at the end, they choose the one-on-ones, they chose Webb and Walker, and Webb won the rep. So.
Wow, that's something that I will probably have to watch the rest of the week, because I'm sure Walker will try to come back with a vengeance, no doubt.
One would think.
Ty Felton, the wide receiver in the second group was the one that definitely caught my eye. Was one of the more fluid route runners today and put up some of the best and most consistent reps, I think, of the day. Any of those other wide receivers in that second group, Brew McCoy, I don't know. I saw we had a comment as well asking about what we saw from Jack Beck as well today.
Oh, he had a really good catch outside his frame.
He did, yes.
In practice. Yeah, I thought
some interesting guys.
I thought Jack Beck looked good from what I saw. I'm with you. Ty Felton kind of stood out to me the most. Another one of those like gadgety, smaller frame yak guys that you get the ball in his hands and let him take off. But really crisp footwork, really clean releases, good breaks. I thought he had a pretty good day. Jack Beck to further my Brew McCoy agenda as well. There were a couple of times, man, on the inside slants, he's just automatic at separating. And that's the thing that I saw on tape with the Vols was like, man, when he gets these situations where he releases inside on that simple slant route, he can separate. There are glimpses. The way I phrased it was like 1 out of every 6 reps that you watch from that Vols offense, you see a play where Brew McCoy looks like an NFL wide receiver. Looks the part, good size for the position. I'm curious to see how he builds upon that today.
Yeah, I think that's going to be very, very interesting. As we wrap up here on the things we took away from the first day, anything else for you? I'm still struggling to what to make of the Ole Miss defensive linemen in general. I think we saw some good and bad things from all 3 of them today.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see how much they can start to maybe project themselves as where they are right now on big boards and whatnot. Anybody else that stood out to you specifically today that you think should be on people's radar, specifically maybe for the Titans or otherwise?
Yeah, I'm going to pander to Vols fans, and I'm going to shout out Omar Norman Lott as well. I was kind of concerned about his size, not really knowing like what is he, D-line, edge rusher, because I think he's listed as defensive line on the Senior Bowl's website, but he was getting run at edge rusher today, winning some reps. Looks like a good, strong edge rusher that's probably going to be there day 2. A case where maybe, I don't know if he's going to be, the 35th overall pick or whatever, but if they're able to pick up like a 3rd round pick or an extra second or something like that, could be in play there. But I thought he had a pretty good day today too.
Yeah, and it's going to be very interesting to see the rest of the week.
Yeah.
I think today, ultimately, there were a lot of interesting players, and it's going to be interesting to see how they continue to develop here this week on day 2 and 3, and potentially become those day 2 and 3 picks that we end up. Because I know it's a new regime, but there's something about the Titans in the Senior Bowl, man. They just love picking the guys they see here. From where they also talk about the interviews and how big of a thing that is. It's going to be a fun rest of the week, specifically getting acclimated also to the Chalet de Mardi today.
Chateau
de Mardi.
Fun word to say.
Chateau de Mardi. It certainly seems like it affected our chat today because
there's a lot of if they could see what's going on in here, there are literal sex swings at the kitchen table. There's a doll. What is going to happen?
Paulina Garcia over there.
I don't know what's happening to that doll this week.
It's going to be fun, and I'm very excited. Stoney, anything that you want to plug? I know you are turning around right after this show, and if you want some more content, where can they find you after this?
Yeah, I'm going to go appear on Football and Other F Words with Zach Lyons. I'm going to write a column about today's practice on stackingtheinbox.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at Stoney Keeley. I've been live tweeting all day. Yeah,
live tweeting, maybe having to add a hashtag that says you're in Mobile sometimes.
Well, when I tweet, there's a lot of thick ass men popping down here. People don't know. If people don't know I'm at the Senior Bowl, they don't know what that's about.
Yeah.
So I got to tell them. We got to organize it.
We do have to. We have to. Yeah. Jake says sex swings and swing tackles. That's what we're here for.
That's what we're here for.
In Mobile.
Let's do it.
Thank you to our sponsors, ML Rose and Sinkers. Once again, we're not in Nashville, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't check them out. Go check out ML Rose, 7 locations in the Nashville area, along with Sinkers Beverages, who have been serving the East Nashville community for almost 40 years. You can also find them on Uber Eats. Just search Sinkers on Uber Eats, and they deliver the booze to you. Stoney, it's going to be a good rest of the week. I'm super excited to see what else unfolds. We'll be back tomorrow and then also Thursday. 2 more shows this week covering everything we saw, at least 2 more shows, I should say. 2 more shows covering everything we saw and heard the next 2 days. Can't wait. Make sure that you subscribe to both the 440 Sports and Broadway Sports Media channel. Make sure that you are up to date on the podcast so you know when this goes live afterwards. And until tomorrow, I should say, this has been the Hot Read Podcast live from Mobile, Alabama at the Senior Bowl. We will talk to you then.